Hey guys, it's Oakley, and CA has continued to roll out with these videos. This is going to be the Dwarf campaign walkthrough. It's going to be revealing a couple new things in this video. In particular, we're going to be going over the army and a bit of the diplomacy here. So I'm breaking it up into several different videos. So we're going to start this off just the way the walkthrough does by looking at the main campaign map here. It's awesome to see when you zoom in all of these different territories. One of the things that did pique my interest is when you hover over these settlements, you can see what their main sort of resources are. So I decided to crop out all the different resources we saw. So you have dyes, gold, iron, timber, and then gemstones specifically. The gemstones seem to be around Karaz Akarak. I assume the gemstones are going to be super important for getting a lot of money, and perhaps it's even required to unlock certain Dwarven buildings. I'm not quite sure yet, but it seemed like of all the provinces, I think Karaz Akarak is the only one we've seen with gemstones previously, which makes sense for the lore. The dwarves definitely want to, go after the big stuff, or at least that's underground. They did also hover over some of the other factions. So the one of the factions, the Border Princes there, it kind of showed you the relationship between them and the dwarfs. Some of the things seem familiar to us. Military actions against the Greenskins, against the Scabby, so wars, past deeds like that have caused you to have pluses or minuses. Nothing too different on that front. Next, we're going to move along to some of these armies. I was pretty interested to see the, again, an up close of the terrain looking beautiful, and then the armies here looking like they're pretty healthy, especially with a lot of them up to like triple veterancy right there. It looked like they were all gold, which was rather interesting. But what's going to happen here is there has been a greenskin army that's popped up and is going to be attacking one of these settlements. So the dwarfs are going to have to come in and react. But they have a bunch of settlements all around here. Karaz Akarak in particular has this, so you might think, well, the armies are away, so this could get sniped pretty easily, but it does have pretty substantial garrison units. So CA goes ahead and shows this here with the garrison units. This is all here by default. So Corlers, Thunderers, Longbeards, lots of different units. We saw the same thing with the Empire, and this is going to be something that is, for all the different factions, they all get these big garrison forces to prevent capital cities and other cities from being sniped, especially with the underway passage and all that. So this will make the AI way more competent. I did blow it up a little bit just so we could see things slightly more clearly. What you'll notice on the right is one of the units is bearing a lantern. That means that some of the garrison units for the Pillars of Rungi and Mount Squighorn actually have miners in them. So I went ahead and took some of the unit cards again and blew them up so I could take a look at them. Thunderers and Corlers here, just wanted to compare them with other units. Thunderers have the shortest range with 135, compare that to 155 range of the Corlers, and the Peasant Bowmen of Bretonnia also at 155. Peasant Bowmen still seem to be doing the most damage, which is pretty crazy. More missile damage than the Thunderers. I was kind of surprised to see that, although if you look at the Thunderers missile damage, there is armor next to it, which probably means it's armor piercing. Now we go on to the Catapults. So the Grudge Thrower and the Organ Gun, again from the Dwarves, compared to the Field Trebuchet from Bretonnia. Range seems to be equal for the Grudge Thrower and the Field Trebuchet. However, the Organ Gun is quite short range. It does, however, have the highest punch in terms of missile damage. And weapon strength is kind of across the board the same. Ammunition for the Organ Gun is super high. So that is going to make for a rather interesting gun that's just supposed to sit there and fire, shot after shot in close range. Next, I decided to pull up a couple different warriors. First, comparing the dwarf warriors across the board with swordsmen from the Empire, orc boys from the Greenskins, and then men-at-arms, which is halberd infantry from Bretonnia. So amongst all of these, the dwarf warriors take the cake when it comes to melee defense and armor, with 80 armor and 71 melee defense. That's much, much higher than anyone else. Even melee attack, they're pretty strong. The Empire's sword infantry does kind of have a close stat line to them. And now I decided to plop in the hammers just so we can compare dwarf units to the rest of the units. Again, same high armor stats and all that. Leadership, which you'll notice is the thing that's replacing morale, is very high for the dwarves. The hammers here in particular get even more weapon strength, pushing them far in excess of what we saw previously. Then you pull in the Longbeards here, which have pretty high weapon strength between the dwarf warriors and the hammerers. stat-wise, they're a little bit lower overall than the hammers, except when it comes to melee defense. They seem to be, again, between the dwarf warriors and hammers, so a nice mix for the longbeards. And then finally, I pulled in the miners. We got a little bit of stats for them. One of the cool things that I saw here is they have a bonus that says they're good against gates. So CA had confirmed in the past that there are no more torches to burn down gates. You will have to attack it, and it looks like miners will be able to chop right through gates, which is going to be an interesting mechanic, to say the least. Dwarfs, you would assume, slow, very methodical in their approach. How are they going to do sieges? Well, if you have a bunch of miners in the front, they're just going to chop through any door, which is pretty cool. Charge bonus on those guys is pretty low, and the stats were pretty mediocre. But yeah, that was it for the most part. Then kind of what they showed here was some of the stances. So for the dwarfs, we have ambush stance, march stance, raiding stance, and encamp stance. It seems like most of the factions do have similar stuff. Again, it functions like Rome 2 and Attila. Once you pop one of these abilities, then it will then trigger different things. So raiding stance, for instance, decreases your movement range, but it increases your income generated, public order in your province, and it makes you immune to attrition because you're kind of living off the land. Ambush, hidden until unit is discovered, chance of spotting the enemy, blah blah blah, stuff like that. The stance in camp in the description does talk about making a defensive camp. I don't really think we'll be getting a camp like we saw in Rome 2 or Attila, where it was its own battle tile, although I may be pleasantly surprised. I do hope we get to see a Dwarven fortified position with deployables. That would be really epic, a way for them to kind of have a Karak on the flat land outside from the mountains, because otherwise they're going to be stuck out in the open, surrounded and split up and devoured pretty much. But that's it for this video. Just wanted to cover, piecemeal some of the units and also the diplomacy, and a couple other things like that. Again, these walkthrough videos are very useful. There's a lot of information to pick out, although I am kind of surprised that we haven't heard much for the vampires, but that is coming soon. See you in the next one.